Okay, so here goes. Okay, so today we're discussing the 6th and 7th limb. We're just putting it together. And one of the important, or we will quickly discuss the 6th and 7th limb, and then we'll move on to the gifts. Now, the gifts may seem a bit strange, etc. So we're going to talk through it, and there's lots of these gifts. So I'm going to show you the slides. We'll choose one or two. What I'd like you to do is when we go through the slides with all the gifts is, if there's any that interests you, then bring it up. Right? Because there's so many. When you're going to see that there's so many gifts that he talks about, and he also talks about the siddhis, etc. So what we're going to do is actually work with the ones that you find interesting. But let's move on to Dharana and Dhyana. So this is it. As soon as we get here, we've come through pratyahar, which is inner awareness, and the inner journey of yoga begins. So actually the inner journey of yoga begins with pratyahar. And as soon as we get to Dhyana and Dharana, we start to get, it's basically just the inner practice of yoga. So we're focused completely inwardly. Okay, and this is it. Vibhuti means glorious. And in the 3rd chapter, Patanjali discusses the supernormal powers that the yogi can achieve. Now, the reason I say supernormal is because when we talk through these powers, they can seem out of the ordinary or mystical, or however, when we break them down, they do not defy the laws of nature, right? So they're not beyond nature, they're just within the laws of nature, hence normal, just a little more a little higher, or a little more astute at doing something that's relatively normal. Now, Vibhuti also refers to miraculous results from that can be gained from the practice of yoga. But first, we really need to just talk about the last 3 limbs. And the last 3 limbs are discussed within the Vibhuti Pad, which is the section of the 3rd chapter of the sutras, focused on these blessings, these benefits, the glorious results of yoga. The reason it's actually discussed, these 3 limbs are discussed here, is because if you practice these 3 limbs, you can very quickly start to experience some of those results. Now, ideally, you want to experience all of them, but even if you just if you achieve 1 or 2 of these limbs, you can actually experience some of the benefits of yoga. Now, the limb number 6, Dharana, is fixing the mind on a single point. So it's fixing the chitta, the mind, on a single object. So in effect, Dharana is focus, right? Limb 7. So basically, all Patanjali is saying is Dharana, number 6, or the 6th limb. As soon as you've passed through pratyahar, all you've got to learn how to do is focus the mind on a single point. And when Dharana remains constant, when the focus remains constant, then we achieve Dhyana. So Dhyana is unwavering. When Dharana becomes unwavering, then we experience Dhyana. All that means is focus is unwavering. Focus, instead of being on for a short period of time, becomes a longer period of time, and that becomes concentration. So Dharana, all Dhyana is concentration. And then we get to Samadhi, limb 8. Samadhi is where concentration is completely absorbed in a single object. But at this point, when the concentration is completely absorbed, there is no difference between the concentration and the consciousness. And this is where Samadhi is Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Samadhi is the complete cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. Okay, any questions about any of that? Because, you know, it's just these first few slides, it's just sort of the technical details, and then we can go in through the discussion.
Could you just go back one slide?
Yeah, sure.
Can we just go through that paragraph? Samadhi is where the consciousness is completely absorbed in the single object, which is devoid of external force. Is that are you talking internal?
Yeah.
So it's all about you and your internal consciousness.
Basically, you know, we talked about pratyahara, where we turn the focus from external to inner focus. Right? Inner awareness, inner focus within your body, where you're not allowing external distractions to shift your mind. So the mind can become absolutely still. You lose all the fluctuations. Does that make sense, Seema?
Yes, it makes sense. And does Samadhi have a time? Is it a time thing, or is it something that you achieve once in your life, or is it a constant thing?
So basically, we're going to discuss this in detail in the next chapter, right? Samadhi, you can achieve this state, the state of prolonged, focused concentration / consciousness. And so you can achieve, anybody can, you know, achieve this state for a period of time. And that is Samadhi. And then you're in Samadhi and you come out of Samadhi. Right? And then we're also going to discuss next week, there's different types of Samadhi. Samadhi where you focus on an object. Even though this object is internal, it's based on an object. And then there's another type of Samadhi where there are no objects. So, you know, even though we have this inner focus, you're not focusing on any specific thing. You're keeping an open mind. Vikalpa, nirvikalpa, you know, we're going to break down all the different types of Samadhi. But this bliss, this consciousness, anybody can experience it. However, if you can prolong that experience, if you can live in the state, that's what is the highest goal of yoga, is to live in Samadhi. So you can go in and out of it. You can prolong it. You can, once you learn how to achieve it, you can then use it to gain the stillness and the inner peace that you need at any time in your life. Does that answer the question, Seema?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's clear.
Okay, now he also, you know,
Ruth's got a question, I think.
Oh, Ruth. Okay, go ahead, Ruth.
So just putting together the pratyahara, then going on to Dharana and Dhyana. Mm-hmm. So with pratyahara, you know, I understood you're focusing inwards, you know, you're becoming very aware of your body. Mm-hmm. But it seems that when the transition goes to 6 and 7, mm-hmm. within that, you're choosing just one object. So of all the different things that you might focus on, you choose one.
Yeah.
And then by, first of all, focusing, then possibly that becomes concentration. And possibly that could become Samadhi.
Yes. And the reason, you know, when you talk about the object to focus on, you can choose any object, any, you know, part of the body if you want to. any aspect that you want. You can choose anything to focus on. But yes, exactly that. So it goes from complete inner awareness, which is reducing the external distractions. And then when you have that complete inner awareness, you can also learn how to prevent or use, the physiological changes in your body. You can learn how to work with those to help maintain your focus and then your concentration. And once you can achieve that, then you can actually go willingly into Samadhi. Or you can, enter Samadhi at will.
One other question. So I'm relating this to things that people just do.
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe if somebody was an expert musician,
yeah,
or a painter, or an athlete, could they, when they're really working on their particular thing,
yeah,
could they actually be doing this without actually calling it yoga?
So yeah, that's the reason, we call it peak experiences in that state. We call it, it's studied, it's called flow experiences, peak experiences, but it is exactly the same, in terms of the, definitely the Dhyana experience is exactly the same. Prolonged concentration on a single object without really needing to focus, because the thing is, the difference between when we focus, we need to focus, right? We need to direct our mind and we need to hold it there and we need to actively reduce distractions. But once we can automatically reduce the distractions and you just go into that state where you can be working on something for 3 hours and it doesn't even matter, because it's almost becomes like an automatic process. You have completely concentrating on what you're doing that you lose track of time and space. And that happens to athletes, that artists, expert performers of in multiple fields have that experience. So definitely. Now, this is it. When he then talks about when those three come together, the focus, the concentration, and this Samadhi, this prolonged concentration. That's called samyama. And samyama is an important step. We need to, if we're building it bottom up, some people can achieve this, as we talked about, expert performers, whether they learn to do it in childhood, whether they learn to do it from their constant practice, which is like yoga, disciplined practice, or whether they do it innately, whether it's just an innate ability, but they have the ability to bring focus, concentration, and total absorption. That's the other way to look at Samadhi, total absorption together. And when you can master this, these three things coming together, when you master the samyama, then it's, your understanding of things around you, your understanding of your art, of your not your process, because you're not thinking of your process, but your ability to do things becomes illuminated. It feels like something is acting through you and it's not really you doing it, because that ego is lost, the I is lost, that insecurities are gone, everything is gone. You're just doing what you need to be doing. And then he goes on to talk about that this process is mastered progressively. It's gradual and you shouldn't expect immediate results. And 3.5, aphorism 3.5 is where he talks about Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi are the essence of yoga, transcending the previous limbs. Now, this is the reason, people call this Raja Yoga, and then they create paths to just practice these three limbs. And yes, some people like Jnana yogis, people who are, innately Jnana yogis, innately intellectuals, or able to focus and concentrate their minds, then this becomes very easy for them. However, if you look at all the other, there are multiple different types of people. We have different abilities and traits, and some of us are more emotional or physical, or need to be constantly moving, whatever. If we're any one of those other people, in any of those other characters, if we have any of those other characteristics, then it becomes very difficult to focus. However, if we follow the bottom-up process, Anybody can learn to get here. So this is where the yoga is. Although we all want to get here, you can either get here if you are innately able to get here, but it is open to anybody who follows the 8 limbs. And that's a very, very important point that Patanjali makes. And then he goes on to talk about how your consciousness changes after you can achieve samyama, after you achieve the last 3 limbs of yoga. A flow of tranquility arises. You become aware of the shift in your consciousness, and you're aware of this inner tranquility with understanding. So you're aware, you're aware of, I think how I experience it or understand it is, it's not that you're not aware of problems in life. You're aware of all the problems. You can see things are happening, but and you can think of solutions and you want to find solutions, but deep down, you're not bothered by them. It doesn't become emotional. It doesn't become something that you feel insecure about. It's just about, how do I resolve this issue? You don't take it personally. So I think that tranquility comes from that ability to separate or not get. And I think Seema had brought up this question, are you not emotional? Yes, you can feel the emotion, but you realize in this situation, I don't need to be emotional. It's not going to help the situation. And he goes on in 3.12 to explain that you are not affected by pleasure or strife. Your thoughts take the same form in either situation. So whether something's good or bad, if you need to find a solution, you will be focused on finding the solution and not whether you think the thing is good or bad. And then he goes on to talk about how this process is very different for different individuals. Each one is on our own journey, and this process of transformation is achieved in different ways, right? By each of us based on our experience. And he says, well, the process is the same. The practices are similar, but how you progress on the path is based on your experience, and it's completely individual. So we all may be practicing exactly, or taught exactly the same method, and we all may practice for 1 hour every day, but how we progress along this path is completely based on past experience and on our own experience. There's no need for speed. Some people need to repeat the process multiple times to get full mastery, and others can achieve it very, very quickly due to some innate ability. However, everybody can achieve full mastery, and there is no wrong way. As long as you want to achieve this, and if you're working towards it, there is no wrong way. Now we move on to the benefits. So by practicing samyama on a specific area, you gain supernormal abilities. Now, when he says a specific area, it could be within your body, it could be, studying a particular area as well. Studying, if you want to study anything, he goes on, he talks about it. If you want to understand the solar system, then by doing samyama on the solar system, by gazing at the stars, by really focusing and paying attention, becoming one with the galaxy, you will understand that. It's about developing your ability and your awareness and focusing your awareness on whatever you want to achieve. He also talks about knowledge of past and future. Can be achieved through samyama, but at this stage, if you access universal consciousness, and it's not temporal, so past and future now. And he also talks about, this ability to transcend words. So you don't have to, so you're able to understand all beings just by observation. You don't need the words. You're able to understand past actions by observing the present. You can see where something comes from by actually focusing on where it is right now. He also goes on, he talks about by direct perception, you're able to understand the movement of other people's minds. you're able to understand their mental state. We know that we have mirror neurons that match each other. If I spend time with you, I have these neurons that actually very, very quickly mirror yours, mirror the same neurons that you have. So yeah, so we know this now, but then he didn't know it, and yet he talks about it. You can also tell how, and then he clarifies this. He says you can tell how another person's mind is moving, but you can't predict what caused their mind to move. So he's not, he's saying this is not like precognition where you can tell exactly what happened in the past, etc. You can tell where they're at, but you may have to ask them what caused it to understand fully. And yeah, he says you learn how to make yourself invisible if you want. And that doesn't mean, you're going to completely disappear, but people won't see what you don't want them to see. They'll see what you want them to see. So you get to choose, what you want to show and what you don't want to show. And yeah, by closely observing yourself and others, you can predict the time of death. You can, if you observe body physiology, you can predict what's going on in your body, but also what's going on in other people's bodies. But, he talks about, the benefits of this practice: universal goodwill, supernormal strength. You can see things that are subtle, concealed, or in the distance. And then, yeah, samyama on the sun, knowledge of the solar system, samyama on the stars, knowledge of the galaxy. You can awaken intuitive knowledge, understand cognitive processes of others. By focusing on sattva, you can understand purusha. We discussed this in Sankhya philosophy. And the most important thing, though, your senses become more acute. Hearing, seeing, touch, and taste and smell, they all become more acute. But then he gives you a warning. But these powers can become obstacles. Do not abuse them. Do not become too attached to them. Because if you become too attached to them, then you won't allow yourself to progress further. He also goes on to talk about achieving the perfect bodily form. You can see beyond the gross. You can see into the essential nature of things. So I'm not going to go through each of this, but if you have any questions, let's have a discussion from this point forward. There's lots and lots, and we can go back and forth. The perfect state of the body includes beauty, grace, strength, and the hardness of a diamond. And then he lists the 8 siddhis. So shape-shifting sort of, but it's not really. So he talks about anima, where you can make yourself appear small, mahima, where you can appear large. But this is more about understanding your metabolism and being able to do what your body needs to do to get certain tasks done. So you can actually become bigger, more muscular, you can become smaller depending on what you need to do, and understanding your body. So your body, you can actually change the shape of your body based on what you need to do. And you can do that very quickly, because with the body awareness as well as the understanding of metabolism and the foods, etc., because you understand the gunas and the essential nature of things, then you know how to change things. Lagima is the ability to become light enough to defy gravity. That's all about being flexible and nimble. You can become heavy and immobile. That's basically, you can either withstand attack, or you can be stubborn when required. So that, if you believe in something strong enough and there's somebody opposing it, so you can actually withstand attack. When he talks about prapti, or ability to acquire objects from distant places, all it means is you are resourceful. You know how to get what you want. And, you can also be very independent. You do whatever you desire without restriction. That means you're not actually limiting yourself by other people's opinions. You can actually focus on what you need to achieve. Vastiva, you also have the ability to inspire others by your actions, because you have focus and you have clarity of purpose. And the ability to master any field, because you have the ability to focus your mind and to concentrate. And if we can focus and concentrate on a thing long enough, we can learn a lot about it. We can master it if we concentrate on it for long enough. So he goes on to do, to talk about these siddhis and illumination, when there's a full understanding between Purusha, and matter, then you can acquire knowledge and mastery over all that exists. So it's just about making it more and more subtle, focusing on the things that you need to focus. But it comes through one's own perception, your inherent nature, letting go of the ego, your cognitive abilities. You can also sense this about other people. So there's a lot. Oh yeah, but then the important thing, he comes back. So we're going to move on next week to Kaivalya, right? The liberation bit and the various parts of Samadhi. But in order to achieve that, he says, you have to renounce the powers that you have. Any of these gifts that you get, you have to be willing to lose it. In order to achieve full liberation, you have to be able to be willing to even lose whatever gift you've worked and developed, because you can't be attached to anything, even the gifts. And he also talks about being discriminating here. Once you achieve certain abilities, you will get invitations from powerful people. Do not get caught up with their desires. Do not become their tool because you have this ability. So, no matter what you're offered, understand your purpose and what you're trying to achieve, as opposed to selling out. Choose your allies carefully, discriminate, focus on allowing your path to progress. So yes, that's it. We can move on to the gifts.
Blimey.
a lot. You can achieve a lot with this.
And you can achieve it all, but if you value it too much, it means nothing.
Yes, you can achieve it. But if you hold on to it, then you're not going to progress further.
I enjoyed that one. Thank you. Are you going to share the slides, Natasha?
I will share the slides, yeah.
Yeah, that was, I would like the whole set.
Yeah, I'll definitely make that available.
It sort of draws you in, doesn't it? It's sort of like enticing you into all these wonderful things that you can achieve with your life, and the sort of the peace and harmony and all the positiveness. And then in the end, well, actually, if you value all of that too much, you're not going to actually get to that final goal.
You're not going to get to the final goal. Yeah, we see that in all the stories, like the whole thing, it's always like Buddha was a prince, he gave up so much, to achieve. So that's the whole thing, no matter what you have materially, what these gifts enable you to achieve materially, if you really want to progress, you have to let them go, because you can't take anything with you, anything material.
It's hard though, isn't it? Especially, I think apart from Mithali and Kashmira, we're all, a little bit older. We've been so trained to have a certain lifestyle. I'm talking about all the materialistic things now, to expect certain things from your life, and to change that is quite a big ask, isn't it? I'm not saying it's difficult, or it can't be done. I'm just saying it's quite a big ask.
So that's what he's saying, you can, if that final goal is what you want, then practice the yoga from limb 1 up onwards, 1 limb to 8, and eventually you will get there. Eventually, if everybody will get there. But if we're gonna, and this is it for the Raja yogis, for the people who just want to focus on 6, 7, 8, they have to just want this. They have to know that I'm doing this to give everything up. And so therefore, this is a limitation. If you haven't come with that mindset that I'm willing to actually give everything up, then how dedicated are you going to be to this practice?
It reminds me of a question I was going to ask you, and I think you may have answered it. I was reflecting on the story that you told on the WhatsApp group about how your teacher, when you'd done all this brilliant set of notes for your teaching, and your teacher got you to burn it page by page. And when I was walking the other morning, I decided I was going to ask you, why do you think he got you to do that? And what did it do for you? But I think I've kind of seen an answer here, but I don't know if it's linked to this or not.
Definitely linked to this. definitely linked to this. Well, two things there. I'm gonna give you my interpretation of why it was burning.
Does everybody know the story that I'm referring to?
No, but I think you've just told it, but I don't know it. Tell the full story.
Okay, so when I was first teaching or asked to start teaching yoga, and I'd had a very long yoga practice, but when I was first, and I taught a yoga with various other teachers as the second teacher. And when I knew that I was going to be teaching my first class solo, and my teacher was going to be there to observe, I'd started, and this is, I'd started creating this book. And this book was something that started when, with my yoga practice, or as it was developing and as I was teaching. But when I knew that I was actually going to be teaching this class, I created this perfectly curated books with all the poses, all the notes and details. And, even on that day when, and I would teach classes with other teachers and then take the critique and then write everything down, write down the critique, see how I was going to improve, do a self-analysis, and then plan what I was going to do in the next class. And this is exactly what I did when I taught the class in front of my teacher. I sat down and I started writing notes. And he asked me to get rid of it because for two reasons. One was, don't become dependent on the book. Focus on the now. Mm-hmm. That was the number one. Focus on the now. And the second thing was, the teaching has to become intuitive. If you're going to go back referring to your own notes, it's never going to become intuitive. And this whole thing, this allows you to develop intuitive knowledge. But if I held too closely to that book, I probably would have still been holding onto that book. Mm. So yeah. And this is it, exactly what he's saying. And for me, that book was the book of secrets, the book of books. It had it had all these things, and actually you don't need it. And it was liberating to not have it. It is liberating to not have it. So in evolving and in allowing ourselves to evolve, we really have to let the past go, even if it means burning it up, even if it means, and this is what yoga is, isn't it? The burning up all those things that are holding us back.
But do you think, Natasha, it was because your teacher, I don't know whether they were male or female, thought that you were good enough at that stage not to need it? There may be other people who need that support and help at a point, and then you get to a point where you don't need it and you become too dependent.
Exactly. So there's two things that we say in yoga, right? Now, one is when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And it's not that the teacher magically appears, it's that when you are ready, you will see what you need to learn, and you will actively find the person who can teach you when you know what you need to learn. Number one, that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, when you trust the teacher will guide you. So that was the two things. Yes. And so that's, maybe he thought I was ready. Maybe he would not have burnt it if he didn't think I was ready. It is also, yes, for me as well, it was freeing because you also to a certain degree say, well, you don't need this anymore. So yeah. So Kashmira and Mithali, Seema brought you up. I'd love to hear your points of view. You're right. You guys are much younger than us.
I think I would have to say that as much as it might come across, or it might seem that it is a little bit simpler, or maybe not simpler, maybe not easier, because we haven't been living for as long or had as many life experiences. I think that sometimes the expectations from other people filter down, for me personally speaking anyway, and what sort of life you should strive to achieve, and what's important and what's not important. So one of the points that I picked up on one of the gifts was the one that you mentioned about being independent and following what's true to you and not allowing those external factors or opinions and views to sort of guide you and distract you, but trying to focus on what it is that you want as an individual. And it is very poignant, I feel, at this stage in my life, and that's something that I am trying to I'm trying to figure out for myself as well. And I do feel that it is a little bit difficult because we all live in this world, and it's hard not to get influenced easily, because then I think confidence comes into play as well a little bit. Like you question your confidence and your truth. Is this actually the right way, or is there a right way? Is there a wrong way? That's just kind of my take on it at the moment.
Yeah, brilliant. In our first discussion, David brought up this question. He asked, is it easier because we already have it? If you have achieved something, then is it easier to then say, okay, I've achieved it, I know what it feels like, and I'm ready for this? Or is it easier to achieve this when you don't have it, and you haven't experienced it? So is it easier to let go of the desire, or is it easier to let go of the actual material possession?
But what if you're at almost a crossroads, and you can choose between one or the other, and you've never experienced one or the other? So then what do you choose?
So then it goes back to this, everything is based on your experience. You have to look at what you have experienced thus far, and based on what you have experienced, what is the best choice that you can make? It's always about, I think he discusses it in one of the aphorisms here as well. He mentions this is about your experience. This path, this progression always has to come down from your teenage years to, you're only in your early 20s, but you have, experience already. So based on what you've experienced and what you've seen in the world thus far, what's true for you? What's right for you? And yes, you may then decide, well, I actually need to experience a little more. But what do I need to experience to actually make a better decision? And then go out and experience those things if you think you need to experience it to be able to make a better decision.
I think something, this takes me back to a conversation you and I had, and I had asked you, how do you explain to other people that what they want for you is not what's best for you? And you said something so simple, and it's funny because you don't think about it in the moment, but just sit down and have a conversation with them and explain to them, as opposed to expecting them to understand and not saying anything, and being evasive almost, and coming across as maybe perhaps rebelling when that's not the case, but just explaining what your needs are and what's right for you, I suppose, at this moment in your life. So yeah, I think it all ties together really well.
Yeah. It's this, I think Seema had also asked this question previously, what if other people don't understand? You're on this path and people don't understand. Well, the only way we can either, if we want to understand, communicate with them, or lead by example, be the best self that you want. Sorry, go ahead.
I've had this experience before when, I behave differently, and then in fact, it was somebody close to me. They were saying, "Well, we know what you're going to do." They would make assumptions. We know what you're going to do, and I'm going, "No, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do this." And it took them a long time. To accept the changes.
Yeah.
And I think Kashmira sounds wiser than he is, I have to say, because often the experiences that you have are, especially when you're younger, they're thrown at you. They're thrown at by your family and your friends and school. So you don't have. Yes, you have choices, but you're not. You're not old enough, or you might not be experienced enough to be able to make the choices that you're saying that you can make. Does that, so you
You see, the thing is, and I think that's important, because at any point in our lives, all we can do is go by our experience.
Yeah.
Right now, and this is, it's part of the reason that I talk yoga to anybody I meet. I try to get out these practices, try to share, is because I think at any age, if you learn a few of the skills, then you can use it, even if it's just one or two of the things. And if you learn how to use it, then you can make, but then also, if you only learn it at our age, then we can use it now. We can't go back and eradicate the past or wipe out the past, but we can create a better future. At any point, you can create that better future.
absolutely.
I just wanted to share something. Actually, it is a little bit personal, so I hope you don't mind. But when you were talking about grounding practices and how we can sort of not allow these external factors to influence us, and deter us from whatever our path may be or our truth may be. A few weeks ago, I had went to go and visit my friend, and she's recently had a baby, and she's happily married. And after spending an hour in her garden, I was driving home, and in my head, naturally, I was thinking, oh gosh, is this the kind of life that I want? Oh, I do want it, because all of my friends have this. And then it took me back to something that I had read in the Upanishads, and another discussion that I had with Natasha, and also just bringing me back into that moment, and not thinking about these other desires that society or family or everyone else has placed on us, or as an individual, but thinking about what is right for you at this moment in your life, and not allowing yourself to, I suppose, not allowing your mind to sway in that moment, because there have been points in my life where my mind has swayed and it's gone down that rabbit hole. And I feel like these little steps and practices do help us, if we can, and if we make an effort to remember it in those moments. I don't know if it relates, but I'd share that.
No, definitely. I mean, the reason we practice a lot of these techniques is so that we can call on them when we need them. That's the main reason for the practice, because in a calm state, right, we all can be brilliant yogis, but in a stressful situation, we're only as good as our practice, whatever that practice may be. Because when, for whatever reason, if there's a lot going on, and our conscious mind, the working memory is being utilized for other tasks, then the default mode, the unconscious networks are gonna actually take control, and and they will respond in how they're trained to respond. And this is what the regular practice does for us, is it actually retrains those responses.
Can I give a not so deep example? Yesterday, I had to go to the dentist. I was in the chair for about an hour and 20 minutes. And I just shut my eyes and do some of the yoga nidra stuff that you were, and I've been doing that for the last couple of years since you've taught it. So just start at my feet, and the dentist always sort of say, "Are you okay?" Okay, yeah, absolutely fine. I just take myself off into another world. It doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
And yesterday, he was getting back tooth ready for a crown without an injection or anything. Bloody painful, but
yeah.
So it has helped me to be calmer. And you've known me since I started, so you know that. You can probably see it in me. But yeah, I think Kashmira raised a lot of interesting points there.
Yeah. So, yeah, for me, when it comes to, when I first, I think, read this bit, I was quite young. I was probably 12 or 13, and I was so excited because at that age, right, you kind of I didn't read it with the depth of understanding that I have now. So I read it with this 12 or 13-year-old understanding who really wanted, who wanted to hold on to my magical childhood. and I was so inspired by the siddhas. I was like, actually, and that, for a good few years, that's what kept me practicing daily, just focusing on that. And so it's amazing how, I look at that and I think, actually, I was 12. That's it. It kept me going. It kept me going for a good number of years. And then you start to notice things. You start to see changes within yourself. I think, a little later in my teenage years, and you realize, actually, he didn't mean that at all, but I'm sort of glad it kept me doing this. So, I like that too, because even if you don't get the full understanding or the deep understanding, or you don't understand the innuendo, if you find things that inspire you, that keep you on your path, then you reach the goal as well, whatever those things may be. So we can end earlier today. I'm sure that everybody would be happy for an earlier night. Yeah. So I had so many slides. I could have spent a little more time talking to you about the siddhis, but this is good. So yeah, that's brilliant. So next week we have our last Yoga Sutras discussion, and we'll be talking about Kaivalya, the liberation, the last chapter. That as well, I think, will be quite a short discussion. So good to see you guys.
Thank you. Nice to see everyone.
Thank you. Good